Thank you, thank you. Just before I give the welcome, I've been asked to thank everybody who has worked so hard to make all of this possible. So why don't you give yourselves a big hand? You know who you are. Take all the days, many hours have been put in, much time. And so we just want to thank all of you. I've had to write mine out tonight. So y'all know I usually don't use written manuscript. This indeed is a historical moment for the Union Hill and Union Grove community in Buckingham County, Virginia. So we welcome the Reverend William Barber, President of Repairs of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and the National Call for Moral Review, and former Vice President of the United States of America, Mr. Gore. Chairman of the Climate Reality Project, a non-profit devoted to solving the climate crisis. Tonight, we're grateful that these justice and climate leaders have accepted our invitation to be with us. Tonight, you will hear why Mr. Gore and the Reverend Barber came to Buckingham County, Virginia. The timing is impeccable and not by happenstance to come during Black History Month in the place where Carter G. Woodson, the father of the Black History movement, was born of former slave parents. Carter G. Woodson stood for the truth. And so tonight, my friends, you will hear the truth from experts in environmental justice, experts about crack gas, experts about legal issues related to the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline and compressor station that is proposed for the Union Hill, Union Grove community. You will hear the truth that dominion and corporations do not want you to hear and talk about. So may you be moved by the personal testimonies that shall be presented. May you be recommitted tonight and uplifted by the interfaith litany shared tonight. We live in an era where many people deny the effects of climate change and fail to recognize their ethical, social, and moral responsibilities, especially when a dollar can be made or corporate profits enhanced. Our air and water is under threat. Pollution is rampant. Our wildlife is in peril. Our land is destroyed, and ownership faces the possibility of eminent domain. Our health is at risk, and our way of life is compromised. The poor, the aged, the young, and the marginalized people are left with the promise of a short-term financial gain, but in reality, are left with the long-term consequences of the true economic cost. Presumably offset by the strategies of investors and big business with promises of stronger local, state, and regional economies. So maybe tonight you come simply to be in their presence, or maybe if you come from a moral and ethical background, to be educated to the truths that we stand together in a moment of strong reckoning. So we must stop the polluting of our planet and stop the injustice towards those with less political power and voice. So tonight, I take the pleasure and the honor to present to you those who've come to help turn an upside world right side up, that humankind reigns over the profit line. The truth, the truth, the truth.
For creation to be freed from bondage, for the hungry to be fed, for all to have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, for the sick to be healed, for the beloved community to come on earth. We lift our voices and call out for environmental justice and quality health care for all.
We know that pollution and climate change negatively affect people's health and quality of life.
We hear the call of our sacred texts.
Allah is in the water, God is in the dry land, Allah is in the heart, God is in the forest, Allah is in the mountain, God is in the cave, thou art in the tree, thou art in its leaves, thou art in the earth, thou art in the firmament.
We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves.
We hear the call of our sacred texts, that all beings be engaged in one another's well-being. Let all weakness, sickness, and faults be diminished and banished. Let everyone, everywhere, be blissful and at peace.
No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be.
When the people we elect prioritize private, corporate, and financial interests over our precious natural resources, we must speak out.
We have a fundamental right to clean water, air, a healthy environment, and public resources to reverse the polluting impact of extractive and fossil fuel industries.
When 4 million people do not have unleaded water to drink, we must speak out. Stop poisoning our children, stop poisoning our water.
When our politicians enact legislation that denies the sickness of our Mother Earth and allow big corporations to devastate our nation's land for their own profit and greed, we must speak out.
When those same elected politicians deny the connection between ecological justice and justice for the poor, we must speak out.
For creation to be free from bondage, for the hungry to be fed, for all to have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink,
For the sick to be healed, for the beloved community to come on earth, we lift our voices and call out for environmental justice and quality health care for all.
This is our history, and that's why we don't want none of this to come through here.
They're just trying to say that we really don't exist. And they're also basically saying that our lives don't matter.
At the center of the proposed pipeline is Union Hill, a community built by the descendants of freed slaves. It is here that Dominion is planning to construct a 57,000 horsepower compressor station.
We are in the zero zone. In other words, we are first to go.
My great-grandparents were sharecroppers here, and it makes you angry to think about it. To think that something they worked so hard for, and this land that is so beautiful and means so much, and this land gives so much to us, this could all be gone.
When natural gas is compressed into a liquid, it releases toxic fumes in the air. The sections of the pipeline around the compressor stations are the most likely to leak or explode.
We know that it will emit poisonous gases. We know that. And we know that it will definitely contaminate the water.
They don't look at what happens when they do a blowdown, which means a lot more is put into the air, which is when a lot of people do get sick. It's after these blowdowns.
Residents and activists paddle along the route Dominion Energy's Atlantic Coast pipeline.
So far, we've postponed the whole certification process over a year through constant activity at all levels.
Buckingham County is like the heart of this pipeline project. That's why it's such an important place to focus.
We are now just recently beginning to find slave cemeteries. That's where a lot of the freedmen names came from, which include the Laura name, Claiborne, Austin, you name Perkins.
We want to pass this land down to our family, from my grandmother, my mother, myself. I even have nephews, it'll even go down to them. So many generations. And with this compressor station coming, we may have nothing.
This community is perhaps 85% black. Perhaps that's why they say this area has no culture or natural resources, which is both lies.
After 3 years of being dismissed at public hearings, residents are preparing to escalate their protests of environmental racism and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline.
So now when we want to have some testimonies and we want to ask Dr. Floyd if she would come, would come and just briefly introduce all of them. If they would come and stand together, because we want to show a unified front, right? That there's a connection between the science and the legal. Also, while we're here, I want the cameras to pan around and make sure you all tell it that this wasn't just black folk, and it wasn't just white people. But tell them it wasn't just native folk, but that we were all here together in one community. And I see a boy up in the top, but as a black man, I want you to put that sign down a minute. I'm a black man, so I can say this. And I want us, what folk to see, is I want everybody to stand. Because see, I know how the media, so I'm going to focus on one thing. I want everybody to stand for a second. To put that, to see, because this is how they defeat us in division. Now I want everybody to grab a hand. Let's put all the, let them see us tonight, not a sign, let them see us. And put those hands up. And now say, look at us. Not a sign, but look at us. Because we are the sign that change is coming to Union Hill and change is coming to the world. Give yourselves a hand tonight.
I'm honored to introduce the expert and first-person community testimonies tonight. I'm an anthropologist, and I'm in the tradition of Zora Neale Hurston. Our experts are the community members who tell us about their stories. But it's very important that we get across the information that people need, the facts, to counteract the misinformation. So first we'll be hearing from Karen Camplin, who's testifying on the history and culture of everything. And she's the Environment and Climate Justice Chair for the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP. Next will be Mary Finley-Brook. Dr. Brook is testifying on the science of frack gas. She's an associate professor in the Department of Geography and the Environment at the University of Richmond. David Neal is testifying on the ways that our laws and policy protections are not being enforced. He's a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center in Chapel Hill. And following their testimonies later in the program, there are going to be 3 testifiers from the community who will be telling you their first-person testimonies. Thank you.
bluntly that I completely disagree with the historic and cultural assessment that was submitted by Dominion as part of their environmental impact. That this area does not exhibit a cohesive cultural landscape. Union Hill is far from that. Within its boundaries, Union Hill is filled with abundant, rich history, its natural beauty, its calmness, and most importantly, the amazing people. Maybe they thought there wasn't any cultural or historic or heritage here because the record of the Buckingham County courthouse was burned down in 1869, and with it were the records of all the slaves that were within this area. But Union Hill is far from that. The African American culture and history is far from who is recorded on those slave ledgers. We're far from that. So the culture and heritage of Union Hill wasn't destroyed that night in the fire. And we know that because we know of the struggle of the people who founded Union Hill, the determination to make sure that this community was built, something that they could pass on from generation to generation. And we know they prided themselves with property ownership, and they knew this was something that they could give to their generation, the wealth and the equity that was tied to these lands. We know all of those things. We also know that they prided themselves on building the community as they established the two churches here. To me, the environmental and racial injustices plaguing Union Hill is more than the environmental devastation that's going to come with it if the pipeline, which it's not, is going to be constructed. Or the constant emissions from the compressor station that we know is going to give off emissions constantly. That's not going to be built either. But what is the injustices going on in Union Hill? It includes the environmental racism and the continual efforts to erase and devalue African American and people of color. This marks an opportunity for us, for Governor Northam, our elected officials, and our regulating agency to take a pause and confront the truth of what is happening here today and make every effort to right the wrongs so all communities can begin to heal. This is a time to respect and make note of all the tribes, struggles, and determinations of the founders of Union Hill. Located on the property purchased by Dominion from the Variety Shades plantation, we know there are some burial sites. This is the time that we need to restore those burial sites and avoid what Dominion is doing. They're ignoring and devaluing the American heritage. This is not the time to ignore the past. This is the time to confront the harsh realities of the segregation practices that were used to demoralize the slaves by not allowing their loved ones to be buried in cemeteries with whites. And they were given to the far reaches of whatever plantation site it was to be left and ignored and forgotten. Let this be the time that Union Hill ancestors are properly identified, honored, and provided the care and dignity that was denied to them in life. Let this be the time we learn who they are, we learn their names, and we complete the fabric of Union Hill's history and culture. This is the time to stand with Union Hill. This is the time to say no pipelines, no compressor stations, no to fossil fuels and natural gas projects. Thank you.
And I served this past year on the Governor's Advisory Council of Environmental Justice. Our council exposed disproportionate risks to African American communities and low-income neighborhoods from dangerous new gas infrastructure. We pressed for emergency intervention to protect Union Hill. Subsequently, Governor Northam disbanded our Environmental Justice Council. And then he created a new one. These aren't advancing. Can somebody advance for me? A new council that could only evaluate predetermined executive order in an attempt to limit public discussion of civil rights crisis caused by gas expansion. Advance again, please. Historic Union Hill is the wrong place to build a compressor station, but there are additional problems. New gas pipelines take the world quickly forward towards a tipping point. We must act today to avoid climate instability with high financial costs and social upheaval. Political leaders ignore the scientific, we have no advance. The scientific evidence of methane, one of the most potent greenhouse gases. Since natural gas is predominantly made up of methane, there are climate-forcing leaks as we extract, transport, and use gas. In spite of planetary limits and proven harm from methane pollution, do you know methane is not regulated? And do you know why? Because of the lobbying power of the oil and gas industry and the selfish, short-sighted, and dishonest actions of politicians. Conventional energy production causes excessive land, water, and air pollution. Gas as we extract today is not natural because fracking uses hundreds of toxic chemicals that end up in our groundwater and our drinking water. There is air pollution throughout gas production, including exposures in many homes from gas leaks. But the most concentrated toxicity occurs around compressor stations. Nearby residents are exposed to annual emissions measured in tons of hazardous air pollutants such as benzene, formaldehyde, and arsenic. These pollutants are labeled hazardous because they've been documented to harm human health. And in a rural county without reliable cell phone service and with limited internet service, Buckingham residents might not receive advance notice of scheduled blowdowns, which is when the most toxic air plumes occur. They can't then choose to leave the vicinity to protect their health. Now, Union Hill is populated, and in spite of false and erroneous claims, reducing the population by 600% in the air permit application. So there's daily safety risks. These are from fires, explosions, particularly for these proximate families, due to the highly pressurized gas equipment and the flammable contents. Yet residents were ignored when they requested cumulative risk assessment and comprehensive health studies. Now I must draw your attention to the fact that there are some who benefit from Buckingham's devastation. There are corporate executives and investors who line their pockets through expansion of gas projects. Meanwhile, captive ratepayers like myself, under utility provider Dominion Energy, have to pay for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, a project nearly $3 billion over budget. So my energy sector research demonstrates pathways to produce energy that is good for the economy, good for the people, and good for the planet, like Yogaville's solar array in Buckingham. Many of the people on this stage work to support a shift to renewable energy in Union Hill. My students and I are collaborating with farmers like the Lowrys and landowners like the Harpers to create local jobs while producing healthy, sustainable energy for community benefit. Join us. We are all Union Hill. What happens in this historic urban community demonstrates the moral fabric of our society. As a scholar and an educator, I stand with Union Hill, and I proudly stand with all of you who do too. Thank you.
Good evening. At the heart of the legal issues surrounding the ACP are some very basic questions. How much will it cost? Who pays? Who profits? And can we afford it? Now, when we look at the Buckingham compressor station, we have to see it as a link in the larger chain of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. The largest and most powerful energy companies in our region have used their combined strength to push forward the 604-mile pipeline, one that would ship gas from West Virginia to Virginia and North Carolina to generate electricity. The actual price tag Originally, it was estimated to cost around $4.5 billion, with a B. Now it's forecast to cost upwards of $7.8 billion. Now, before that kind of money can be spent, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is supposed to determine whether it's in the public interest. Now, it failed to do that here. Instead, FERC looked no further than the contracts to purchase gas offered up by the ACP. And here, it's important to stop and understand the structure of this deal. The ACP is owned by utility holding companies, primarily Duke Energy and Dominion. And the parties that have the contracts for that gas, they're affiliated public utilities of those same energy companies. Now, FERC decided that those self-dealing contracts were an adequate sign that there's a public necessity here. Yes. And because of FERC's allowance for a 15% rate of return, it's the shareholders of Dominion and Duke that are going to make big profits from this deal. But who pays? You, me, anybody who is a ratepayer of Dominion or Duke Energy. These monopoly utilities will seek to recover their costs plus their profit, plus that rate of return. Now, too many of our neighbors already cannot afford essential electric service, and they cannot afford the additional expense of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Now, who's going to pay for the pollution we just heard a little bit about? Now, most directly, the people of Union Hill. The company's decision to put its polluting compressor station in the predominantly African-American Union Hill furthers a shameful legacy of concentrating environmental harms in communities of color, and we can't stand for it anymore. From 2010 levels by 2030 and reach net zero by the middle of the century. And there's no way we can achieve that if we keep building fossil fuel projects like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We also cannot afford to scar our landscapes, muddy our streams and rivers, or fragment our forests for this unnecessary pipeline. FERC advocated its responsibility to ensure that all required environmental permits were vetted before rushing forward with its approval. FERC's premature approval is allowing them to take private land and cut down trees, even while essential permits are under judicial review. Communities like Union Hill, landowners, and all of us are in harm's way. 7 federal permits have been stayed or vacated, suspended by federal courts or by the issuing agencies themselves. As a result, I'm happy to report that construction of the entire pipeline is halted indefinitely. Risky, expensive, and unnecessary pipeline. Thank you.
Guide our feet, Lord. Guide our feet. Guide our feet, Lord. You see us down here. We're fighting for justice, and we need you to guide our feet. We stand as one, Lord. We stand as one. We stand as one, Lord. We stand as one. And we're down here fighting for justice. And we need you, Lord. We need you to walk with us.
I said to Gore that I thought the ancestors needed to hear us sing to them. One of the songs they sung when they were up against something bigger than a company. They were up against a whole country that had decided that they were 3/5 of a person. If they walked in for justice and won, we black and white and brown and red and yellow can walk now for justice. On a tour, we're headed to Alabama, where people are facing ecological devastation, environmental racism. He'll tell you more about that. He's headed toward a big conference. We understand the connection between systemic racism, poverty, and ecological devastation. And that's why we're here tonight on our way. And we got an invitation. I want the media to know we came here by invitation, because we don't believe in helicopter leadership. We didn't come here to lead the folk. We just came here to say, y'all fight like you never fought before. I want the media to make sure that you print that the Black Lives Matter sign was being held by 2 white folk. I want us people to understand that we are unified in ways that people don't even understand. I want tonight to be a preacher, theologian for a few minutes to bring on the persons that will testify, and then afterwards I want to invite our brother Gore to come and just talk to us in a real way tonight. But we have a moral problem in this country and and in this county when it comes, Reverend, to environmental injustice. And as far back as the Torah, the Jewish rabbis will tell you, and even the text that rabbis, Muslims, and Christians honor, will tell you that God's vision was for us to take care of the land, the water, and the air, and not to destroy it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our own image and in the likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish and the sea." And the Lord was not talking about a company. He was talking about dominion or power. In fact, in the Hebrew, dominion does not mean destruction. In Hebrew, the word dominion means responsibility. And it is not a company's business plan for profit. Dominion is God's instruction for community and taking care of the land and all that is in it. Dominion, the moral call of God, is that we are called upon to exhibit the kind of loving care that God cared when he first created the world. And as one poet said, he scooped out the mountains and the valleys and spat out the seven seas. Dominion is not about being destructive. That's a false view of dominion. The correct understanding is one is to have dominion in terms of service, responsibility, and stewardship of the land, the water, and the air. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't tear it up, build it up. Now later on, and this was a covenant. This was a covenant in the Hebrew scriptures. Later on, the prophets would remind people, and particularly the rulers and the elected officials and the kings of the ancient world, the prophets would remind them that any time a community or a king violated the covenant of constructive well-being dominion, they were in fact engaged in defiling the land. Morally speaking, anytime a corporation for mere profit poisons the land, the atmosphere, the water, and then spends money to divide the community with lies, that is a violation of covenant. In fact, it's the first S I want to talk about. I want to talk about three S's, and it is sin. As a preacher tonight, I want you to know that dominion is practicing sin. And anybody that's joined up with them is practicing sin. You say, Pastor, how you know? Because Isaiah 24:4-6 says, the earth dries up and withers, the world languishes and withers, the exalted of the earth languish. The earth is defiled by its people. They have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant with God. Therefore, a curse consumes the earth, global warming. A curse consumes the earth. People can't find clean drinking water, and its people must bear the guilt. Therefore, earth's inhabitants are burned up because they violated the covenant to take care of the earth and the atmosphere. It's systematic. It's systemic. Poor communities like Union Hill and others, you watch that line that shows you where the pipeline is going, it's doing it. The poor white folk in Appalachia, poor black folk in Union Hill and Northampton County, and poor Native American. It's poor, 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 poor. Everybody that tells you to be all right, especially the politicians, be all right with it being in your community. Ask them, why isn't it coming through theirs? Poor communities like Union Hill and others, poor black and white, brown and native communities are chosen, and it's not new. There is a reason why, for instance, they run the pipeline and the compressor station, and they never go through affluent communities. It's systematic. Now, the sad part of that is they don't realize, or if they do, they don't care, that once something is emitted in the air, it's not going to stay on that side of town. But what we see happening here, yes, is environmental racism, but Brother Gore, it's also something deeper. It's locally undesirable environmental land uses. It's a term called LULUs. Really, they use it in court. LULUs are places where companies decide that they are locally undesirable environmental, in other words, where they think they can put it and get away with it. Hazardous waste facilities, solid waste disposal sites, contaminated industrial sites, and now pipelines and compressors. They are disproportionately placed in poor communities and black communities because they think they are Lulu. But if they thought they were going to get away with it in Union Hill, they are out of luck. This ain't no Lulu. This is holy ground. This is not a slave or parent who believe in freedom. And the ancestors are calling us. Not only is it sin, not only is it systemic, the moral issue is scandalous. The word scandal or scandalous means causing the general public outrage or something that is negligent or irresponsible. I want to say tonight that any governor or legislator, Democrat or Republican, or even if you're black, that has chosen dominion over this community is scandalous. Now, I want to go back to that again, because I know some of the media came and they said, I saw the headline, said we're gonna get after Governor Northam. Well, yeah, you're right. Because in order to show that he seriously doesn't believe what the blackface said from 30 years ago, you can't just say I'm sorry and address cultural racism, no matter how grotesque cultural racism, that is rudeness and words and pictures are. The real racism you must prove you're against is systemic racism. And Governor Northam, if you want to be a great governor, if you want to help lead the nation, the first thing you ought to do is stop by Union Hill and tell this compressor and tell the people what's wrong. Tell them you right. don't have a picture. If you are against voting rights, if you support environmental racism, if you are against health care for everybody, that disproportionately helps African American and brown people, all of this racist. Democrat, don't you think you get a pass just because as soon as the picture came out, you called for the governor to resign? If you haven't been down here and stood with union here, then you just as guilty too, Democrat. Now look out for a moment. If you're black, and you're wavering, black, and you're supporting the pipeline and the compressor, knowing what the facts say, then you just as part of the racism as anybody else is. I don't care, even if you're a county commissioner in this county. And I'm trying to say this to save your life, your political life. Because these companies will use you, and when they get through with you, they'll throw you over. I'm almost an old man now. And they'll have you saying crazy stuff like, well, everybody got an opinion. Some stuff ain't about your opinion, it's about what's right and what's wrong. When you hear folks say, everybody got an opinion over an issue like that, they sound just like slave masters. Slave masters say that everybody had an opinion. No, some things are just wrong. And to ignore the impact of this pipeline on poor folk and on black folk is scandalous. Scandalous. Any leaders in West Virginia, North Carolina, it's scandalous. We can't just trust what's going on. Governor Northam said today, the state air pollution permit issued last month for Buckingham County compressor station is the strongest of its kind in the country and ensures that air quality and public health will not be compromised. Two things about that, Governor. Two things about that, Governor, because I really want you to be a great governor, and you can if you do right. First, when you say strongest in the country, if what's in the country is already weak, if you got a deregulator in the White House deregulating everything, then saying what you just did was the strongest in the country is not saying anything. And secondly, Governor, if it's so good, request it to be in your backyard. Write an executive order and say, I want it in my backyard. Now, the governor said, I hope that Dominion and Atlantic Coast Parkline will listen and respond to the concerns of this important historic community. They would if you politicians would start backing them up. They have to listen. They have to listen. But not only listen, change. And it's scandalous when you join the business over the people. Then it said, Dominion, it says, we'll be a good neighbor. Dominion is not these people's neighbor. Dominion will make billions. I'm going to close this. Billions. Now, y'all, I'm not too smart. Claire, I come from the country. I grew up priming tobacco and chopping peanuts and stuff. But, you know, somebody ought to be real ticked off when the Dominion representative went in the paper the other day and said, well, we offered them $5 million and a community center and an improvement to the rescue squad. Let me unpack that for you. You talking about 50-some billion dollars, and you want the folk in Union Hill to be happy with $5 million and a community center where they can go have more meetings and an improved rescue squad, so after they get sick from their mission, the rescue squad can get it to them faster. Really? Yeah. That's scandalous. First of all, Union Hill shouldn't have to get those things from Dominion. The state of Virginia ought to be invested in community center and better rescue squad and schools in this community. Union Hill shouldn't have to sell its heritage for what's right. And the last time I checked, as I talked to Miss Ellen today and others, the folk in Union Hill ain't no pimps and prostitutes. They are good people, are created by God, and only want things to be done right. Don't play games in this community. Dominion, based in Richmond, said it has reached out to Union Hill community by forming an advisory group. We have profound respect for the youth. No, you don't. When you are putting something in my community that could kill my children, you don't have respect for me. We share the community's desire to preserve its historic resources. No, you don't. And we've taken meaningful steps to protect them. No, you don't. You are taking meaningful steps to protect your bottom line, and it's time you called out for it. And it's standing. Now, it's another reason, not only is it systemic sin and it's systemic, it's one more thing I want to say here. It is not only is it sin and it's systemic, it's scandalous because I messed around, Brother Gore, today in the car and read the Virginia State Constitution. And y'all got some folk that put their hand on the Bible and told a lie. And I hope the Dominion representatives ain't here to hear this, because I want you, because the Constitution says, and this was that Constitution written back in the 1800s when black and white people came together after slavery. It says, no person shall be deprived of his life, liberty, or property without due process. When the governor kicks people off of a commission just because they don't agree with him, that's not due process. Due process? That's a rigged game. And you tell them, I said, and the legislature not off because it said that the General Assembly shall pass no law whereby private property, the right to which is fundamental, shall be damaged. NAACP President, every black member of the Black State Caucus in the country ought to be here, and if they aren't, we ought to be checking why they can't stand with this community. To destroy and damage your private property is constitutionally out of order. It says the damaging of private property should not happen, particularly, I'm paraphrasing, but here's the actual quote, David. If the primary use is for private gain, private benefit, and private enterprise, increasing job, increasing tax revenue, or economic. In other words, you are not supposed to, under the Constitution of this Virginia, pass policies that enable private businesses to damage people's private property property just for their own private gain. It's scandalous. It doesn't have to be this way. As these witnesses come, just know that there's another side to everything. Jesus died on Friday, but there was another side on Sunday. Scandalous is irresponsible and bad, but the antonym to scandalous is good, magnificent, respectable, proper, reputable. It's time for the governor, the legislature, Republican and Democrat, whoever you are, to stop being scandalous and start being good. Good to the people. Everybody that's taking money from Dominion to keep their mouth closed ought to be ashamed of themselves. If you got to break with the money, I read in the Bible where it says your soul is worth more than money. Don't mess around and gain favor with Dominion and lose your soul. Anybody that would dare try to beat up on this little community and offer you a few crumbs that are really based in line, because even if they gave you $5 million, you're going to pay it back in higher bills anyway and medical costs. We need some folk that'll break with the money and do what is right, and anything less is scandalous. Turn from the pipeline. Turn from the closet. Turn from the problem. And turn toward the people. Turn from the pipeline. Turn from the closet. Turn from the problem. And turn to the people. Come on, turn from the pipeline. Turn from the closet. Turn from the problem. And turn to the people. Because anything less than that is scandalous. And we are here to shut the scandal down and expose it for what it is. Would you welcome our testifiers from the community? John Lowry, Irene Leach, Richard Walker with Waller. Would you come at this time? Welcome them with a big hand of applause.
Thank you, Jesus. My name is John Lowry, and I grew up in the Union Hill community. In 1963, I left Buckingham County for the military, where I joined the Air Force. And after 40 years, I returned to Buckingham County. And I relocated to the property where I live now. I have a ranch. I raise cattle. And the reason I returned, because we have the full season that we can celebrate. The clean air, the clean water, the quietness, and so much greenery, which I was used to. And I really like this community, and I like the county of Buckingham. I want to quote what the great Martin Luther King Jr. said, as it pertains to the struggle we're in. A man dies when he refused to stand up for what is right. A man dies when he refused to stand up for justice. And a man dies when he refused to take a stand for that which is true. I'm here today speaking in this place at this event to stand for those same values for my community, to protect my community and its history from a toxic, polluting compressor station which will change our lives forever. The people here matter. The history of our community matter. Creation matter. Union Hill was settled by freedmen, one of whom was my ancestor. And the history should not be erased for a permit for a toxic compressor station. I have great concerns for our water, what is going to happen when the underground pipe leaks. We won't be able to drink this contaminated water. What about our gardens? What about our livestock, domestic animals, and wildlife? They all need water, our most precious commodity. I'm concerned about the toxic air that we will have to breathe. These poisonous and unsafe gases will pollute this most precious air that we breathe. I'm concerned about the effects of noise, of performance, stress, behavior of animals. Noise will have on our cattle, especially newborn calves, and on our donkey. It has been proven that cattle and animals hear high efficiency sound much better than humans. Can you imagine the stress it'll have on cattle on a continual basis? Can you imagine the trauma this noise will cause when a mother cow is trying to give birth? We live in an agriculture area where we raise crops, cattle, dairy cows, donkey, goats, and chicken. And we are stewards of God's earth. And we are to take care of it, not to pollute it.
Bishop, I have another S word for you.
All right.
Sacrifice.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the way that the communities along the pipeline are being treated, like a sacrifice zone. And rural communities are experiencing the quick take and the eminent domain. For most of us, our property is the most valuable asset we have in terms of dollars. But Dominion says we don't need to use our property for our purposes. The laws that we have will give landowners a little money one time, but they won't allow the landowner to fairly negotiate for anything else. Not rerouting through your own property, not safety, not protecting heritage, nothing. My family has operated our farm business at Mount Rush for 117 years. Let's see if we can switch this. The key buildings including the slate-roofed home, original ice house, granary, smokehouse, and barns have been there since 1804, 100 years before we got them. I grew up knowing that it would be my responsibility to help manage it and pass it on to the next generation in as good or better condition than I received it. However, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline puts all of this in the middle of the incineration zone. The company insists on crossing the middle of the fields we use most, refusing to reroute on our property along existing fences where we would always be sure where it was. company could avoid breaking up our fields, the daily operations, and move the path within our property, putting us on the edge instead of the middle of the incineration zone. We'll have to move cattle across that huge ditch every time we need to work them. We'll be permanently limited in our use of that land because we will have to protect the pipeline right-of-way. The pipeline will rip across the terraces my grandfather created to improve water retention of the land 50 years ago, instead of crossing the edge of the field where it would not affect the terraces. If something goes wrong, the resulting fire can't be put out. It has to burn out. And this pipe is much bigger and under much heavier pressure than the ones that have been around here for 50 years. And the safety records for the newer pipelines are not good. If something goes wrong, we could lose everything, including our lives. You might have seen the signs on Route 60 showing the pipeline crossing. Many in Buckingham are along the incineration or blast zones if the pipeline crosses through their neighbor's land. And they may not even know of their increased danger because no one's required to tell them. Rural areas get the lowest safety and the least oversight. Congress has never funded the safety adequately and actually has directed that there be more focus on populated areas because that's where the company would lose the most if something happened. But we as individuals get less safety, thinner pipe, cut-off valves 20 miles apart, less inspections, the whole 9 yards. My husband and I plan to retire at Mount Rush, and my husband is already managing the business. Our current home in Montgomery County looks out on this, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is already under construction. The resulting destruction is even worse than we expected. Last fall, roads were repeatedly covered with 4 inches of mud. In December, I watched Mountain Valley put in a pipe on the top of Fort Lewis Mountain, back-to-back 16-hour days with one crew working rain, snow, and fog. The experience makes me worry about the ACP and what they'll do during construction and how our Buckingham land will be changed forever. Pipeline easements permanently put the rights to our land, the company's rights, ahead of ours. Our current eminent domain laws allow them to take your land easily with no consideration of your use of your property. They tell you you won't know it's there, but you must always put it first. Your life depends on it.
Somebody hurt my family, and I'm not going to allow it to continue. Somebody is hurting my family, and I'm not going to allow it to continue. I will not be silent no more. My name is Richard Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Bridging the Gap in Virginia. In that capacity, I work with the injustices of the justice system. I work with the formerly and currently incarcerated convicted felons and how the systemic racism has made it so that these individuals are spending 75% of their lives in prisons. That this systemic racism to help individual rural areas such as Buckingham to have an economy, they went and had prisons built throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm at this point, with all the bills, I went to General Assembly every year, every session. And every bill that has anything to do with the injustices of the justice system, they get killed, stuck in subcommittee, never make it out of committee in order for it to be sent to the floor. Systemic structured racism in the Commonwealth of Virginia has to stop. Barber, I want to get rid of this lady who's keeping the time. It is reflected not only in the environmental racism, it's reflected in the justice system, it's reflected in mental health, it's reflected in education, it's reflected in the school to prison pipeline, it's reflected in every facet of the Commonwealth of people in Virginia, primarily people of color, and it must stop. All right. Union Hill, as a small child, you can hear my accent. I'm not from the South. I was born in New Jersey, but every summer, from the ages of 5 years old to 13 years old, I spent my summers in Union Hill, in Buckingham. I am 5th generation of my great-great-grandfather, Taylor Harper, who was a former slave, freed in 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation, purchased his land for $15 that Dominion thinks they're going to come on and take an easement through eminent domain for their own greed. It ain't happening. As I said, I'm 5th generation. Sanaya, Giselle, what generation are you? Stand up. Yeah. I am not going to allow Dominion to deny them their inheritance. And I have 2 additional things. One is the 4th generation, 6th generation, and 7th generation Harper's right there. They live within a quarter of a mile from this proposed compressor station. Somebody is trying to hurt my family, and I'm not going to allow it. I am ever so grateful for all these folk that have came to the defense of Union Hill to stop Dominion. I have become a staunch environmentalist. I'm a part of the Green New Deal. Delegate Sam Russell, I am about renewable energies for Buckingham. Today, one of my good friends, newly acquired friends, Reverend Woodbury, was here with us all day. And he walked our property. And he gave me a schematic for how my cousins' houses that are right next to each other on Union Hill Road, how we can take one posting and create solar paneling on each of their houses where we ain't got to pay Dominion no more. Before month at Buckingham Correctional Facility. I work and speak and I'm a motivated speaker because I am a formerly convicted felon. I need to tell you that first. You know, and since being released from prison, I have been working toward getting rid of these systemic racial laws that affect people of color that ended up in those prisons. I will be able to teach those men in Dillwyn and Buckingham how to install solar panels so when they come out of prison, they got a job. They got a certified skill that they can go and get a decent paying job. I ain't seen no stop signs, so I'm getting ready to go. But listen, come Labor Day, every summer, every year Labor Day, before I was born, my family would have a family reunion in Buckingham on Harper Land. And everybody from Union Hill would come by. This year, we haven't had it in 4 years. This year, we will be having our family reunion. And everybody in here is invited. We are all Union Hill. Come on, say it. We are all Union Hill. 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 Say it with me. Somebody's hurting our families. And it's going on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Touch your neighbor and say, now let's stop being general. Tell them, stop being general and be specific. Dominion is hurting our families. Politicians are hurting our families. Money changers are hurting our families. And it's going on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And one of the strongest voices in the world speaking out against environmental injustice, who also understands the connection between systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation, and is raising his voice across the world, is none other than our brother Al Gore. Would you welcome him?
It's quite an experience to be here, I have to tell you. Isn't this something, really? Isn't this something? This is what change looks like, right here. I arrived in Richmond last night. The man driving my car asked me where I was going tomorrow. I said, Buckingham County. He said, oh, that is the most beautiful part of Virginia. And since I've been here, I have to agree. This is the very geographic heart of Virginia. And I think Dominion is messing with the wrong part of Virginia. I want to thank all of the people of Union Hill and Buckingham for inviting us here. I want to thank and acknowledge my daughter, Gore, who really educated me about this. Senator Earth Ethics, and she heard El Rose on, she's an El Rose groupie now. So I began to learn from my daughter and learn more about this. And our friend Catherine Flowers is with us, and so many who should be acknowledged. I don't know what to say about Reverend William Barber II, but I'll tell you a quick story that illustrates the feeling that I have being here on the stage speaking from the same podium as Reverend Barber. The NBA All-Star game was a few nights ago, and Michael Jordan played a role as one of the sponsors and commentators. He's my favorite basketball player of all time. I just love him. The reason I bring him up is, this is a true story. One time he scored an unbelievable 95 points in one game. It was just incredible. And one of the sports writers there, I believe it was for the old Newsweek magazine, interviewed a rookie first-year player on Michael Jordan's team. He had scored 1 point in the same game. And he interviewed him and he said, "What is your reaction to this game?" He said, "I'll always remember this as the time when Michael Jordan and I combined for 96 points." So, I want you all to know I'm going to always remember this as the time when Reverend William Barber II and I combined to issue a moral call for ecological justice in Buckingham County. Some people have shown a few slides. I show a lot of slides, but I remembered that I had 3 or 4 that I wanted to just briefly show. Again, I want to thank the people who invited us here, and I want to just underscore the fact that these compressors emit a lot of pollutants that cause a lot of diseases and conditions that threaten human health. This is what 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's not nearly, I'm sorry to surprise you that way, but that's nothing the way you felt when Dominion started tearing things up there. Now, this causes problems, just the noise. Again, 24/7. But we've heard about explosions and accidents. Some people have the misimpression that pipelines are generally safe. As was mentioned previously, the newer pipelines are even less safe. But, well, let's see, let's skip through this one. That's what it was going to look like. Here is a statistic I'll come back to. The emissions from both Atlantic Coast and Mountain Valley pipelines would double the current emissions from all of Virginia's existing power plants. And now look at this. Now I want you to watch this. I think this starts in the 1980s. It goes up to maybe 2013. This shows all the accidents and the people killed and the people injured in pipeline accidents. And quite a few of these are compressor station explosions and fires. And not the majority, but a number of them are. And just look at that. I don't know if you can see the dates rolling by, but year by year, they really add up. So, that's all the slides I wanted to show you. But my text this evening is that this proposed pipeline is a reckless, racist ripoff. Reckless, racist ripoff. And I want to illustrate those 3 R's. First of all, let me take them in reverse order. You heard a little bit about why it's a ripoff. I want this to sink in here. I want to talk about the climate impacts and the environmental impacts and the dangers. But this never should have been approved in the first place, purely on economic reasons. This is a ripoff. This is a colossal, world-class ripoff of the energy ratepayers in the state of Virginia. And you heard earlier how it is a whole monopoly deal where Dominion and Duke own the gas and the pipeline. And I hope you heard him. I'm not going to say it quite that way, but I might come close. But here's something that many people really don't know. These big utility companies don't really make money by selling electricity or gas. They do sell electricity, they sell gas. But because their rates are heavily regulated and they've learned how to game the system for so long, the way they make money is by building new capacity and adding the cost into their rate base and getting a big percentage of profit on top of that cost. You've heard of cost plus contracts. This is basically a variety of cost plus contracts. And if the pipeline is not needed, they have a powerful economic profit incentive to build it anyway, so they can rip off the ratepayers and get the rates that have been approved by their regulator. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is a part of it. But this is really unfair. Now, why does this happen? The current gas pipelines have almost twice as much capacity as the amount of gas flowing through them to the markets. Because the demand has been going down. Why? Well, because renewable energy has been coming in and taking away a lot of their market. And because of lots of new technologies that have enabled people to reduce the amount of electricity they're using, like LEDs and all kinds of less well-known efficiency improvements. And this is happening all over the world. It's happening all over the United States. It's happening in Virginia. But what do the big gas and pipeline companies do? They've got to go to Wall Street and boost their stock price by saying, oh, we've got growth ahead. Just listen to our story. Our stock is bound to go up in price because we're going to grow and grow and grow. And we're going to, our income from the ratepayers is going to keep going up. Well, how's that going to happen? Well, we got this brand new, huge pipeline, one of the biggest ever, with one of the biggest compressor stations in Virginia that's ever been built anywhere in the United States. And when it's finished, we'll be able to charge all that much more, and our profits will go up, and so you'll want to keep an eye on our stock. That's their incentive. That's their growth story. But it's a lie. It's a falsehood. It is not consistent with reality. The federal regulators did not even consider competition from renewable energy when they initially approved this pipeline. They didn't take that into account. But all the while, the cost of solar and wind has been coming down and down and down and down every single year, while the cost of the pipeline goes up and up and up and up every single year. So the gap that started out here is way here. It is now a completely ridiculous economic proposal that ought to be canceled outright, and they ought not allow construction to begin again. Now, Reverend Barber made this point, but I want to take my whack at it also. I first made statements about this when I read the news stories about the governor of Virginia dismissing these two members of the Air Quality Board so that he could get an approval from that Air Quality Board for the compressor station. As Reverend Barber said, that's not due process. That's what's called putting the fix in. Now, why did the governor do that? Why? And why did he disband the Environmental Justice Advisory Board? Both the Clean Water, Clean Air Board and the Environmental Justice Board were put back together after the vote was approved. It's called putting the fix in for Dominion. I cannot look into his heart and tell you what the motivation was. But, you know, we've gotten to a point in our country where the Supreme Court has ruled that corporations are people and money is speech. And I have understood most of my life that corporations were the most important economic units in our country. But I don't like the fact that they believe they are the most important political actors in our country. We, the people of the United States of America, have to reclaim our own destiny and make the decisions about what our lives are going to be like, what our environment's going to be like, whether our air is going to be clean, whether our water is fit to drink, whether our land is going to be free from poison, whether our children are going to be able to have a fine and decent and clean and safe future. And that brings me to the racist part of it. And there's no way around this. Communities of color and communities made up of low-income families have, for complex historical reasons, been relatively deprived of the same means to defend themselves economically and politically. So when the decision comes to place smokestacks upwind of community A, B, or C, and community C can't defend itself, that's where the pollution source goes. Same with hazardous waste sites, with coal ash sites, with pipelines, with compressor stations. And when I read the history of Union Hill and saw with my own eyes how this historically significant community was being insulted and abused because some people thought they could not defend themselves, I said, you know, that just doesn't seem right. The church we were in at Union Grove had a banner above the pulpit behind it. It said, stand for what's right, even if you're standing alone. We're here to say to Union Hill, you are not standing alone. We are standing with you, and we will stand with you. Finally, the reckless part of it is not limited to the accidents and the dangers faced by people whose homes are near the pipeline and particularly near the compressor station. If you simply take the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, by itself, it would increase the global warming pollution from the state of Virginia, from all energy sources, by 40%. This compressor station and this pipeline would be the single largest increase in global warming pollution from the state of Virginia ever, in one swoop there. And so, you know, global warming can be hard to hear about. The climate crisis is something some people don't want to hear about. But you ask folks at Norfolk, whose properties are flooded now on a regular basis. You ask farmers whose crop yields have been ruined by the heavy rain bombs and the droughts, one after the other. And you ask the scientists who said we ain't seen nothing yet, because we know what's coming. We're putting 110 million tons of heat-trapping man-made global warming pollution up into the sky every day. And sky is not a vast expanse, it's a thin shell around the planet. And it stays, that heat-trapping pollution stays there. And the amount that's accumulated up there now, every day traps as much extra heat energy as would be released by 500,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the surface of the Earth. By the way, that fact I just gave you is not in dispute, not controversial. Do the math. Believe me, I've said it so many times, if they could challenge it, they would. I guarantee that. So accept it, and just, they do, if they don't care. But just think about what that means. Most of it goes into the ocean. And the ocean is heating up so much. 2 more whales found on the beach in Virginia this week. The oceans are heating up so much that it's like a tea kettle on the stove. The steam is coming out, water vapor going into the sky. And when that comes over the land, you get these rain bombs like Hurricane Florence, Hurricane Michael. Go down right the list. Hurricane Harvey last year in Texas, 5 feet of rain in 5 days. And the scientists who told us that this was going to happen have been proven right. The fact that they've been proven right in their past predictions should cause us to pay a little bit more attention to what they're telling us will happen if we don't stop using the sky as an open sewer for all of this heat-trapping gas and threatening our future. Think about the fires this year. Sea level fires, heat waves, rain bombs, all the rest. But here's the good news, and it circles back to something I was talking about earlier. When I said solar and wind is coming down in cost every single month, it is. We have the solution to the climate crisis, and it creates jobs. What is the fastest growing job in the United States of America? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics last month, solar installer. Over the last several years, 5 times faster than any other job. Second fastest growing job, wind turbine technician. We can put people to work at good wages, in good jobs, getting rid of the pollution, saving our future, solving the climate crisis, and making this entire damnable, reckless, racist rip-off of the Atlantic Coast pipeline unnecessary. And if anybody doubts we have the political will to win, remember political will is a renewable resource. Thank you.
Says the political will is a renewable resource. Now we don't want you to stay for a few more minutes because we should never have this kind of crowd and not organize. We have come here just to give a word to you to fight. You've got to fight this fight. Others are standing with you. We're on our way to Alabama. We're going to have to leave. But we want to organize something tonight so that you can hold every county commissioner, every city council, every congressperson, and the governor accountable. This is your land. You are community. And if we, I see that person, yeah. And if we stand together, you can win. You've already won because the lawyers have stopped them through that stay. What they are doing is wrong legally, it's wrong scientifically, and it's wrong morally. Just be seated for a second. Now, we're going to invite, in a moment, Rebecca Rubin to come for a call to action. I want to thank my own son for being here. Where's William III, who was at one of these rallies, and he was headed to get a PhD in physics, and he saw what was happening, and so he said, I'm going to get an undergraduate degree in physics and then a law degree so I can fight on both sides of the spectrum. But I want us to do one thing, and you gotta have some staying power. I know we've been here about a couple hours, but let me tell you, the meeting is up all night. Right? They up all night plotting how they had consultants here today trying to figure out what we were doing. Right. So we have to have some staying power. So one thing I want you to do before Rebecca, come on Rebecca. My wife and my daughter named Rebecca, so come on, where's she at? Come on. But I want you to grab hands for a second. Because it's so important that the media reports this may be environmental racism, but we all understand how it hurts us all. And if you would grab hands for a second, and you may feel like standing, I don't know. Yara, I need you to come in just a second. We're not going to be long. I'm going to do this. Rebecca's going to come. You stay with her. We're going to step out so we can go get ready for early morning flights. But there's a song, Brother Gore, that they always think is just sung at black gatherings. But it's been sung in Tiananmen Square. And it simply says, we shall overcome. We're going to do that first line, we shall overcome. And then the next line we're going to say is, we shall save our land. We shall save our land. If we had longer, we do air, water. I want you all to take it and make it an anthem in this modern place. Since y'all is better with keys.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. We shall
those two speakers had to go, but we haven't done our call to action. And we have with us here today someone that all of you want to thank. Her truth-telling, her bravery, Rebecca Rubin, former Air Board member, will now start our call to action. We have community members who will speak the call to action. It's powerful words we've heard tonight. I've been struggling with some words of my own these past weeks. And I think it comes down to this. As a former Air Board member, I'm disappointed in the Commonwealth's decisions on the ACP, but I'm equally disappointed in the way that it's making them. We got here because politics in the Commonwealth has walked right past those who speak on behalf of environmental justice. I would offer to our elected officials the following thought. If you cannot lead with environment and justice in this day and age, then you cannot lead at all. You cannot lead by ignoring or removing the voices of concern who speak on behalf of environmental justice. And you cannot lead by ignoring the state of our environment at large. The stage has already been set with a dying planet. We are all suffering. We need politics in this Commonwealth, whether they're left or right or center, to begin by being honest about the collapse of the environment and what we can do about it. We need them to make morally informed decisions. I choose to think of tonight not as standing in opposition to something, but as standing in favor of making a right decision. I choose to think of this not as opposition to power, because power need not be inherently wrong, but as standing up against the abuse of power. And I choose to think of this as supporting our fragile ecology and our increasingly devastated planet with all of our love and reverence. So, as Stevie Wonder once said, change your words into truth, and then change that truth into love. I hope that you will join hands, join hearts, join minds with others as we begin a call to action.
We are all union help. To do all you can to find and make public the history of the enslaved people of Buckingham and their freedom built communities. Here and all across the U.S., so that deliberate erasures of that history can never again be used against us.
That's right.
And understand, here where ecology was born, pledged to live up every day the stories of the indigenous people whose land these first were. We must lift up every day the contribution of those kidnapped or born here, whose forced labor built the state of Virginia and our nation. We must lift up the descendants of both people who continue to enrich this country and every walk of life and endeavor. Thank you.
We must know where our power comes from. We must tell our electricity and gas providers that will fight against pain to pollute our earth with frack gas. It is a deadly cocktail of over 80 types of cancer-causing toxic chemicals. We must resist pain to cause deadly harm to people living at gas wells and compressor stations. We must resist the deadly climate changes that harm our earth to the detriment of future generations. We must all wake up to our power as consumers and voters and demand that utility companies and our elected officials use our money to empower local communities, not harm them. Can become energy providers through equitable access to all the state and national money given to the fossil fuel development. We can build solar fields, grow biofuels, and distribute renewable energy equitably. This would bring the economic growth to our communities. We must demand that modern companies and elected officials insist on renewable power sources.
We call on everyone to hold our election officers to what is moral rights and to end policy violence that harms our people and environment. Governor North must redress the harm to racial justice of removing two air board members who spoke out about environmental justice. Related to the Union Hill Compressor Airport permit, he disbanded his advisory council on environmental justice. After they recommended, he issued a moratorium on buildings, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Mountain Valley Pipelines, because of the environmental justice issues. These actions to silence their voices is racial injustice. His action and noting of former Governor Metcalf to silence the voice and the concern of the people of Union Hill are far more trouble than wearing black faces as a young man. So Governor Northern and his Virginia elected sponsor at the local, state, and national level must stop taking the money from the men and all others. From facing the worst affection of climate changes. Climate justice is equitable justice.
Again, we certainly want to thank everybody for your patience. We are all Union Hill. And God bless you. As you travel home, pray that Virginia might do the right thing. Pray that our elected officials do the right thing. Amen. They're going to sing us out.
If you don't move too fast, come hang around and sing with us just a little bit. Don't worry.